Hi, I'm Randall in Texas.
And I'm Matt in Michigan. Today we are talking Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. This is our spoiler-filled review of the movie, the end of the Skywalker saga. So, big part of this movie, Rey's parentage.
hmm
Randall, what do you think about how this movie explains who Rey's parents are and where she came from?
Well, okay. So, since you asked me how I feel about how it explains it, I think it does a terrible job. But, if I'm just talking about her parentage as she's a Palpatine, she is Emperor Palpatine's granddaughter. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that as her lineage. It helps explain why she's incredibly powerful. It's very clear in the Star Wars universe that the Force is stronger with certain families than it is with other families. It's stronger with certain races than other races. Some races can't even use the Force. So I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is the fact that it makes no sense. um, from a perspective of you watch the prequel trilogy, you watch the original trilogy, absolutely zero mention at all. Nothing ever alludes to Palpatine having a family. So it's a logic leap for me. And I have trouble with that in films when films ask me to just, it's okay, you have to believe this or else the film doesn't work. Sometimes maybe you can throw that away, but in this case, I did not like it.
Another thing too, if Palpatine, obviously he does have kids, but if you were to be told before this movie if Palpatine had kids, would you see this person who they casted as Palpatine's son? Would you believe that's Palpatine's son? Because when I saw this, I'm like, if Palpatine does have kids, this does not look like anyone who would have been raised as, a senator's son, the Supreme Chancellor's son, the Emperor's son. Whenever, he had this, child, it didn't fit for me.
It's true, and I didn't even think about that when I was watching it. What struck me as super annoying was Rey is in her 20s, maybe early 30s if you stretch it. I don't really know how old the actor Daisy Ridley is, but okay, this episode 7 takes place 20 years thereabouts after Return of the Jedi. The math just doesn't make sense. When did he have his family? When did this happen in the chronology? I can't. Again, it's that logic leap. I'm expected to just believe it because it's what the story requires me to believe in order for the story to work, as opposed to, well, no, this was said here or here or here previously. I have a lot of trouble with that. And also, I think it's interesting that you say, well, that doesn't look like his possible son. Maybe Palpatine had a daughter, Matt. Did you ever think about that?
No, they say it is his son. I
Well,
believe in the
fine.
movie they say it's his son.
Dang it. Never mind. Oh, that's. But you're right. You'd mentioned this has been a thing going back to episode 7. Rey's parentage. What is it? What's the big secret? What's the big to do about it? And like I said, I am okay with her being a Palpatine. It's not a problem. I'm just not okay that it doesn't make sense in the context of the story.
Oh yeah, I agree. Especially in with this movie kind of thing. I think it goes with a lot with the problems of this movie. I think that this one incident shines a light on the whole bigger problems with this movie. This movie had to cram so much because they wanted to answer so many questions that were put in The Force Awakens, that the rise of, or that the See, I'm getting all the movies mixed up now. They're going back and
the,
forth.
the Last Jedi.
The Last Jedi, that The Last Jedi basically said, well, none of those questions matter. We're going to go in a different direction. This movie did another, like, course correction. It's like, well, no, we're going to answer those things. And to try to put that all together in one movie, you know, and try to quickly go, well, this is who Rey's parents really are, and, you know, this is her lineage kind of thing, how it was handled was not well done.
So I would like to take some time here to kind of just lay out a little bit of the story for people who may be watching this maybe way later. They didn't catch the movie in theaters and they're thinking about watching it. Mind you, this is all spoiler filled. The movie starts more or less where episode 8 left off. The Resistance is very ragtag, very small group, and they're just trying to find a way to keep on functioning effectively. But then you get the opening scroll and it's like, the dead speak. Palpatine sends a message across the galaxy, and I'm like, oh boy. Right off the bat, things are looking kind of iffy. But essentially the whole point of the story is Resistance needs to find Palpatine, needs to find his fleet, which is not really a spoiler because they showed it in the trailers, and needs to do something about it while they can. And they need a way to get to him. So Rey, Poe, and Finn all go on a quest to go find a Sith Wayfinder. A Sith Wayfinder. Let me say that, just a Sith Wayfinder. This movie broke me, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, I can kind of see what they're going with a little bit with the Wayfinder. Like, there are Sith artifacts. Not in the movies. Granted, most people are just going to watch the movies. And you can't rely on people to go through comics and read books and stuff. I mean, for people that do, for Darth Vader, that is a big thing. Darth Vader, what he's doing in between the movies, behind the scenes, is he's looking into Sith artifacts. So I guess they're kind of going on with this, with the Wayfinders being Sith artifact. But yeah. So here's another question too. Where were these Wayfinders actually sending them to? Were they sending them to Palpatine, or were they just Wayfinders to a Sith planet? Or
so
that's the kind of thing. It's kind of interesting.
From what I understand, in the movie, the Sith Wayfinders allow people to navigate to the Sith planet. But this gets into a whole nother can of worms, and this is just a warning to anyone who's watching this early on. This is going to be long. This might be our longest video by far. In this movie, it makes the Sith seem like they're a race. Not just the dark side of the Force are called Sith and the light side of the Force are called Jedi. That they're a race. There's a Sith language, a written Sith language. There's a Sith planet. And Palpatine keeps talking about the rise and domination of the Sith as if it's a actual race of beings, which has never been established in canon that I'm aware of. And I use the word canon liberally. I'm not really up on all of the legacy EU stuff. But, akin to Mandalorians as a race, basically. And that didn't make any sense to me.
Well, the movies never touch on that kind of thing. Like you said, if you want to look into stuff like Sith planets and an actual Sith race kind of thing, you would have to look at legends or whatever you want to say, stuff that isn't necessarily canon. You'd have to get into other elements, which, for the movies should be the focus and everything should be explained in the movies kind of thing. And yeah, this movie definitely, I guess, changes the movie perception of what the Sith are.
Yeah, yes, it definitely does, and to a detriment, in my opinion. Some people might think it's fine, but I didn't I didn't like how all of a sudden there's just all of this information about the Sith. In the original trilogy, the Jedi and the Force in general are almost just thought of as an old hokey religion, as Han puts it, like almost treated as legends themselves. And in this, there's all these artifacts. In fact, there are people who are Sith followers who worship the Sith. The bounty hunter type character who they get the dagger from is a Sith worshiper, and I'm like, well, is this a religion? Is it a race? Is it kind of everything? It was needlessly complex. Can't we just have a bad guy who's on the dark side of the Force, and the dark side of the Force is called the Sith?
So we're talking about the Sith. We gotta talk about the big baddie of the Sith, which is Emperor Palpatine, who is back in the flesh, so to speak,
Literally.
in this movie, and at the beginning too. We see the Emperor right at the beginning of this film, as Kylo goes and finds him. So the movie kind of explains he's back with space magic. They're, using a line from one of the previous movies, the dark side is a pathway to, abilities some deemed unnatural. And they use that line when showing the Emperor to explain how the Emperor is back. And that's about all they explain about the Emperor kind of thing. That, and supposedly that he's the embodiment of all the Sith that have ever lived and died kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I'm going to
That's new.
not just the Emperor, but also with the Final Order, which is the name of the fleet and everything that's been in waiting. What do you think about how they explained the Emperor and how they explained or not explained this gigantic fleet on this Sith planet?
Well, you see, Matt, it says here on page 372 of the script that there needs to be a giant Sith fleet. And if there's not a giant Sith fleet, the entire movie doesn't make sense. So it has to be there.
Pretty much.
Which is... it doesn't make sense. So this is one of my arguments going back to episode 7. The First Order is the ragtag group in episode 7. At least they're supposed to be. This ragtag group somehow puts together Starkiller Base, which would take an immense amount of resources. And almost nigh unimaginable amount of resources to put Starkiller Base together. That would be like the Rebels in episode 4 having the ability to put together a base that's a planet size, It doesn't make sense. It's a logic leap. And it's the same thing with this. So the Empire has fallen. Emperor Palpatine is presumed dead at the end of Return of the Jedi. Yet somehow, miraculously, 30 years later, however many years this takes place, about 30 at this point, after the end of Return of the Jedi, he not only has a dedicated, loyal, fully staffed Navy, like Empire-level Navy. He has the largest fleet the galaxy has ever seen. And logic leap.
Granted, this takes place, decades after Return of the Jedi? There's no way that this is getting built, like the resources.
Yes, exactly.
The Sith planet itself does, I don't know the whole, history of that planet. I don't think it has the resources to, on its own, build the largest fleet, ever supposedly in the history. So the only way you could possibly explain this is if the Empire was already building it, it doesn't seem the Empire was already building it. And here's another thing with the fleet. So we had Death Stars, I would say, in 3 movies. We had the first Death Star, we had Death Star 2,
Yep.
we had Star Killer Base. So what do we do with this? This gigantic fleet, every single one of them now has a planet-destroying ray.
Can we sit back for a second and appreciate that the planet-destroying rays are just giant cannons attached to the bottom of a stone-cold normal Star Destroyer. I heard a fan at the end of my showing who was probably not very happy with the film talking about, literally complaining about it, goes, well, that was just stupid because they had, in Legends, they had the Eclipse-class Star Destroyer, which looked better and made more sense. And I'm like, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's just a giant cannon on the bottom of a Star Destroyer, and it has the power to destroy a planet.
There's a lot in this movie I don't think that was like fully thought through. I think this was I really think this was a movie that after the Last Jedi, they're kind of like, all right, where do we go? How do we tie things up? And we have to get this movie out at a certain time.
Yes, this is a movie that definitely had a release date, and you're like, oh my god, I know we touched on this a little bit, but I would rather see it pushed and get a good movie than we have a release date and we have to come out on this day.
This movie definitely feels like a movie that was thought of between, since The Last Jedi came out. Not a movie that was thought of when they were starting this trilogy.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that they did a whole bunch of forethought on this trilogy at all, honestly. And if they did, then someone allowed Rian Johnson to come in, and I don't like putting the blame on him because someone read his script and said okay to it. Or maybe they read his script and said, oh, we don't have time to change it now, so just go. But either way, the planning or lack thereof is fairly evident in this film.
I will say one thing. I think Disney's actually listening to the fan base, or parts of the fan base at least. I think the first movie, Force Awakens, was kind of like a proof of concept. Yes, we're just going to redo a movie, but it shows that we can do Star Wars kind of thing. People want to see a movie that's back to its roots supposedly again, and not like the prequels that are pre-CGI. And then they got a lot of feedback saying, you know what, there was nothing new in this movie. We want to see something new. So they go with Rian Johnson, who comes with a original idea for film that bucks ideas that you think about Star Wars movies and stuff. So they, to try to appease the people that were upset with just seeing, the same old. And then this movie, I think, is reaction to the people that were upset, saying, oh, well, you changed all the characters and all these promises that you made in The Force Awakens. You just told us that none of those really matter kind of thing. And so this is one of those like, all right, well, we're going to put some fan service stuff in. We're going to answer some of those questions. And yes, even though, we told you that Rey's parents were nobodies, we're actually going to give her,
Well, and it's funny how they did that because they go through the point of saying, my parents were nobody, but they were nobody because they needed to be.
Yeah, they were nobodies on purpose.
And I'm like, no. You could have, it would have been better if Kylo Ren, at the time, bad dark side Kylo Ren, was just pulling your chain. He was just trying to get under your skin, Like, oh, your parents were nobody. And that bugs her. That bugs Rey. Only to find out later they were definitely not nobody.
We're kind of touching on Rey, Kyle, in this one. This is something I actually enjoyed. I liked the interaction between Rey and Kylo in this movie. I think of this as a trilogy. I think that's, the one thing that they have going through all 3 movies, is kind of building on that. This Rey-Kylo relationship, The Force Awakens. It's Kylo coming and seeing, a power Force user and being like, hey, you should join me. You need a real teacher to hone in on these skills. Join me. The second movie, we see that they have this kind of connection. There is a connection between them. And Kylo still wants Rey to join him, and Rey is she thinks that there's Ben Solo still in Kylo Ren, and like Luke did with his father, she can bring Kylo, back to the good side, away from the Sith. And then this one, it's, they build on that relationship between Kylo and Rey and where they both think it's gonna go. Kylo's like, in the end, I'm gonna offer you my hand again, and you're gonna take it, and you're gonna, join me on the dark side. And Rey has questions about who she is, but is basically like, yeah, that's not how this is gonna end, kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree in broad strokes that if anything ties these new three movies together, it's Kylo and Rey and their uncommon attraction or what's between them. Much like the rest of this movie, I'm not a huge fan of how they did some parts of that. I think that some of it just it's again too much logic leak for me. One of the things about episode 8 that I genuinely enjoyed was, there's some weird stuff going on with Rey and the Force and these like scenes where they can between Rey and Kylo where they can speak to each other almost like as if they're in the same room, speak to each other. In this movie though, they take that concept of what can happen with the Force and they jump the shark. I'm okay with what you did in episode 8, but in this one, they are literally having a lightsaber battle when he's on a planet and she's on a ship in their little mind thing. And it's not like it's just happening in their minds. It's physically happening. Things can move between them. And to me, that's a bridge too far for what the Force can do, even with their very special connection. And don't tell me to go read it in a comic or a book,
Well, I'm not going to tell you to read it in a comic book, but I am going to be a Star Wars, apologist, I think, on this one. They kind of hinted that, too, in the Last Jedi. When Kylo is talking with Rey, and it's raining where Rey is, and Kylo is in a room, and I don't know if it's on his brow or on its hand. I think it's on its hand when they touch. He gets water on his glove, which they were already hinting that there is not just a mental thing, but they could actually do a physical thing. And I think, even though Luke was just a projection, it was kind of hinting, too, that there is some kind of physical thing. But there's another instance where they have, physical that I didn't agree on with the Force, and that is with Luke Skywalker. What do you think about Luke Skywalker's Force Ghost being able to catch Rey's lightsaber and
I'm actually okay
also
with it.
raise his own ship? Granted, Yoda in The Last Jedi did the lightning bolt, but to me, it kind of breaks. Always kind of saw the Force Ghost as kind of like, speaking from beyond. Not necessarily changing stuff, being able to change, stuff as their Force projections.
So, yes, if you watch just the original trilogy, you'll get that. But I'm not bothered by what they did in this movie or what they did with the Force Ghost in particular in episode 8. Or I should say honestly, because of what they did in episode 8, I'm okay with what they can do in episode 9.
And I think that's how I feel with, you were saying how you didn't like them physically battling and stuff. I think that's how I feel with that kind of stuff.
Fair enough. One of the things, if you're gonna get into the Luke's Force Ghost bit, if I if I go back to the original trilogy, you know, Obi-Wan's Force Ghost sits down. Obi-Wan's Force Ghost does physically interact with things. Not to the degree that you see in the newer trilogy, but he absolutely does physically interact with things. So there's a precedent there from the original trilogy, although not to the extent you see.
Well, that's another thing kind of going on that's kind of an about face from The Last Jedi. In The Last Jedi, a scene that a lot of people were upset about, Luke Skywalker throwing Anakin's lightsaber over his shoulder, tossing it like trash. And in this movie, Rey tosses the lightsaber in the fire, only to have Luke catch it and then backtrack and saying, oh, a Jedi should never... What do you think about that in this film?
Um, I think that is one of the apologist parts for we're sorry about episode 8 and the way we treated Luke's character. Luke's character in this, and I think probably a little bit of Mark Hamill, just the actor in general, saying, I was wrong. And he says it the same way that Alec Guinness said it as Obi-Wan, where he goes, I was wrong. He's admitting that the way that he handled the situation in the past was improper. But in reality, the biggest problem is in episode 8, it never should have happened in the first place.
One thing I'll say too, though I don't agree with the direction they took with Luke, I liked the interactions between Luke and Rey in The Last Jedi. To me, the interaction between Force Ghost and Rey, I wasn't as big of a fan of. I don't know really what it is. Is it because it's a different tone than it was in the last movie that was off? Is it the dialogue? I can't really put my finger on it. I guess I'll have to watch the movie again to get on. But for me, the Rey and Luke scenes just did not work for me.
They did feel a tad bit tacked on in the overall arcing story. One thing I wanted to say, and I know this is kind of far into this spoiler review to get at, is that this movie really is just Return of the Jedi done poorly. I mean, it has all of the moments of Return of the Jedi. And the moment we're talking about, Rey returns to the island from episode 8 where Luke had, marooned himself basically, become a hermit, and says, I'm just going to stay here. You were right, Luke. I should have listened to you and let everything go. And Luke says he's wrong. But it does not work the same as or as well as Luke returning to Dagobah in Return of the Jedi. I can't quite put my finger on it either, but it's like Luke was returning to someone that he knew and respected in Yoda, and Rey's only real interaction with Luke was pretty much all bad. It was all negative. Why would she return there, basically?
Yep. Yeah, I would agree on that one. One character that I did enjoy what they did with, and we mentioned this in our non-spoiler review, is Princess Leia. Now that we can go a little bit of spoilers with Princess Leia, being a mentor to Rey, actually showing Leia training with Luke, and kind of like a flashback, even though that was digital young Luke and, digital young Leia.
Yep.
But, what do you think on what they did?
All right, so it helps make sense of episode 8 where Leia is such a strong Force user. I liked that because in episode 8 when you're just watching it as the first time you watch it and she's, for all intents and purposes should be a dead character, she Force powers herself back to the ship. So in this, the fact that you now know she did train with Luke helps explain that. And that that she was doing well in her training. That helps explain that. What I don't like is that I had to wait until episode 9 to get that. That is backstory that should have been told to us in episode 7. Give us something to fill in the gaps between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. not just a whole bunch of unanswered questions to be answered later. So I really enjoyed that backstory of Leia and Luke actually doing their training. I just hate that it happened now.
I agree, and I'll give Disney credit and stuff for this. They said that their idea was to have Leia be a main part of the ninth film. That was in the plan all along, and of course, when Carrie Fisher passed away, they didn't think that was going to be possible. But the fact that they were able to pull off, what they did with what they had, and she is a vital part. She plays a big role in this film. And, that is something I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and what they did with again, most of this stuff was shot with Rian Johnson in The Last Jedi, so you can see where they put her into some of these scenes digitally, but only if you're paying really close attention. For the most part, where they've digitally inserted Carrie Fisher has worked very well. And you're right, she plays a really, really big role, a very important part of the film, which we might as well get into since we're in spoilers anyways. There's a scene where there's an actual lightsaber battle, physical lightsaber battle, on the remnants of the old Death Star, of Death Star 2 on Endor, between Rey and Kylo. And they're going and going and going, and Rey is losing. This is the first time where Kylo's really getting the upper hand on her. She's probably a little shaken by the experience she had inside the Death Star with her weird dark side projection, which makes no sense, but we won't go there right now. And as Kylo's really about to do Rey in, Leia reaches out to him with the Force and is like, "Ben," and it stops him. And that was the last gasp for Leia. She used everything she had to reach out to him at a vital point in the story.
She is the one that turns Ben, not Rey. It's not like Rey playing Luke turning Vader. It is Leia is the one that is bringing Leia, and I would say, now we say spoilers, Harrison Ford's in this film.
Yep.
As a memory for Ben Solo, and that, completes his, I guess, somewhat return to the light side.
I really enjoyed the dialogue between Han Solo and Kylo Ren. When I first saw Han on there, I was like, oh my god, no. He can't be a Force ghost. Please don't let Han Solo be a Force ghost.
Which I'm glad they explained that in the film, that he's not a Force ghost.
That he's basically having a conversation with himself. He's manifesting a conversation with his father. I like that. I'm like, thank you for explaining it. Thank you that I can at least believe it in the context of the film. And the dialogue between them was really good. I liked when Han Solo was just like, no, my son is not dead. Kylo Ren is dead. So.
And in the spoiler-free review, these are some of those moments that I'm glad they let them breathe a little bit. Whereas a lot of the movie was fast-paced, but these scenes with Leia, with Kylo Ren and Han Solo, they picked the right scenes, I think, for sure, to let breathe. These scenes needed to breathe. If they rushed through these, they would not have the impact that they do.
And that's part of what I said in our spoiler-free review, where I was like, there's definitely a spot where I think the ones where they breathe the most, the ones where they take the most time, are with established actors like Harrison Ford, where he's taking his time to do what needs to be done for the characters, which I think helps.
So maybe these are nitpicking things, or maybe these are part of, small things that lead to the larger problems of this movie. Things that don't necessarily need to be in this film for whatever reason. C-3PO. He loses his memory, and it's a point to just talk, I think, about sacrifice, but then later it's undone by something that wasn't possible. It's kind of I always think of The Dark Knight Rises when they have this emotional moment by killing off Batman at the end, and then at the very end of the movie, realize that Batman never died, and the autopilot could work after all, even though they told you it couldn't. This movie, it's like, hey, we're gonna wipe C-3PO's memory, and we can't bring it back because R2 isn't, his system isn't powered up full enough to bring back his memory yet.
Well, I said
that's
it's
what happens.
famously unreliable. R2's memory banks are famously unreliable, which I always chalk up to them trying to explain away why R2 doesn't know Obi-Wan. I'm like, oh, that line was literally put in there to appease why R2 has no idea who Obi-Wan is in Episode 4. But
yeah, they
okay.
wiped his memory. Both of them in Episode 3.
No, they did not.
They wiped their memory.
They did not. They literally didn't. I had this conversation with my wife where she goes, no, they wiped both the droids' memories in Episode 3. And I'm like,
C-3POs.
I will get the video out right now and prove you wrong, that they tell you that they only wiped C-3PO's memory.
Yep.
And I'm like, this single line in Episode 9 is specifically, I think, to make people like me have a excuse for why R2 doesn't remember Obi-Wan. Oh, R2's memory banks are notoriously unreliable, C-3PO says. I'm like, since when?
Like, if you go through the full all 9 movies, these are supposed to be the 2 characters that tie all 9 movies together. Like, they're even in Rogue One. They're not in Solo, but they're in Rogue One as well. And, oh man, R2-D2, like, we don't really see much of anything. I mean, in The Force Awakens, R2-D2 was, like, shut off. So that's why we only had R2-D2 at the end. And this one, it's like R2-D2 is just back at the base with Leia, which is what they also did with Rose, too. In The Last Jedi, she was kind of brought in as one of the other, like, part of the main group. And this movie, she was put back to the side, just kind of, playing a role in the film, but not as part of the main group anymore.
If we're going to get into that, the kind of really nitpicky things, the last movie is generally not a good spot to introduce new characters. The last movie of the trilogy. I don't even remember what the little guy who did the
Bobby Frick or something like that.
Oh my god. I'm okay with what they did with C-3PO, except for it made his sacrifice worthless when he gets his memory back. But then, at the very end, everybody shows up to fight the Galactic Last Order.
Yeah, the Final Order
ships and Final Order ships and Carrie Russell's Carrie Russell, right? She's weird, yeah. And this stupid little, they couldn't help themselves. A stupid little guy pops up and he goes, "Yay!" Oh no! Oh.
I'm amazed, too, that Lando was able to get that many ships from all over the galaxy all at once to all come together for the last battle to fight the largest fleet that we've ever seen.
Well, you see, Matt, on page 572 of Script Revision 72 of... Wait, no. There's a footnote here. Wait a minute. It's on page 389, Revision 5. Wait, there's a footnote here. The script says it had to happen.
Hey, Randall, you like how the Millennium Falcon was on fire and in horrible shape, and just, a few minutes later, it's good to go? Like, in Empire Strikes Back, the problems with the Falcon were an ongoing thing through the movie. Even in The Force Awakens, they had some things like Rey trying to fix, the Falcon stuff, which is kind of weird that Rey knows the Falcon better than Han Solo does in The Force Awakens somehow.
Or Chewie.
Or Chewie, somehow.
somehow.
But you know, I mean, how you like that too? That's a big thing. That the
Okay,
Falcon's almost on fire and stuff, and then oh hey,
let's.
guess what? We gotta leave. Hey, guess what? The Falcon is already fixed.
I know that this has gone every which way, and if you're watching this, hopefully you've seen the movie so that you can follow us along. And I'm sorry about this, but let's talk about why the Falcon was on fire. Not that it was on fire, why it was on fire. Light speed skipping?
The Falcon can't do light speed skipping.
No, 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 Matt. Gone are the days of what's taking so long? Do you want to fly through an asteroid, kid? Gotta put the calculations in for the light speed. So far gone are those days where light speed jumps needed to be calculated carefully so you didn't run into stars
Well,
and stuff.
Randall, we gotta avoid all those TIE fighters behind us and this giant slug that's in front of us, which, thank goodness, I'm glad they didn't fly into it. I think I would have lost it if we got the space slug Empire Strikes Back thing again. But it's like, oh man, yes, we're just gonna light speed right past it.
The entire first part of the movie with the light speed skipping, I was already thinking, oh my, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
How about this thing calling back to The Last Jedi, the Holdo maneuver? Now, that was another divisive thing about light speeding into other ships to pretty much destroy an entire fleet. And then that's actually suggested, like, oh, why don't we just do the Holdo maneuver kind of thing? When talking about the final orders, like, oh no, yeah, that wouldn't work in this situation.
Well, I think they went to the point where, like, they said that it wouldn't work where they are.
Yeah,
basically.
The low atmosphere kind of thing.
Yeah, like you can't enter hyperspace from within atmosphere, even though earlier in the movie the Falcon literally did that. Yeah.
That's why it was on fire, though.
No, no, no. It wasn't on fire until after it did the jump in front of the worm, which I guess that was in atmosphere. Matt, this movie broke me.
There is so much in this film that all right, yeah, we just gotta explain it away. We just gotta explain it away. We just gotta explain it away. We gotta go to the next thing.
I walked out of my theater, walking to my car, and I literally started laughing at the absurdity. I started laughing to myself and just said, this is a bad movie. I was still laughing going down the street. Like, I'm in my car driving by myself, laughing because of how absurd the film is. How bad of a movie it makes. If you thought that in episode 8, the logic jumps and the splitting of the characters and the characters just doing things because the script says they have to, or the characters doing things that don't make any sense, like Admiral Holdo not telling Poe anything, keeping him in the dark, which made no sense to the story. In this one, they doubled down on that. They're just like, they keep alluding to the fact that Finn is also training with Leia. They don't tell you that outright, but they keep alluding to it. And they keep alluding to the fact that he's force sensitive because they keep... How do you know? It's just a feeling.
Just a feeling. Yeah, that I didn't like that part either.
Over
that's
over
the ship.
again.
I know that's the ship. How do you know? I got a
it's
feeling.
Just a feeling. I got a feeling.
I didn't really believe in the Force before, but now I know it's real, kind of thing.
And that he's being trained by Leia as well. But not only that, going back to the fact that they doubled down on the keeping pointless secrets from people, he knows about Rey's parentage. Again, they don't outright tell you that in the movie, but it's clear that that's the thing that he knows because he says, I do know what she's going through, and Leia knows too. So he knows, Leia knows, I don't know how Leia knows, God knows how Leia knows, because that's never explained. And then Luke, Force Ghost Luke is all like, oh, because you're a Palpatine. When did you know this? After you died? Because you certainly didn't allude to knowing anything at all, period, in Episode 8. And yes, like, I can just keep going on and on about these little things that make it a bad movie. And it broke me. I did. I was just laughing at it. And I don't think that, like, my theater wasn't sold out, which is crazy. Opening day, not sold out. I don't think that all the people in my theater really enjoyed it either. I think they just kind of watched it.
Like I said, I would say this movie is just okay. It's just okay. It's not a really good movie. I'm not going to go as far to say it's absolutely terrible. It's not a good movie. I'm just going to say it's okay. I've seen worse Star Wars films.
Like I said in our spoiler-free review, there's no... I don't have a problem with the way it ended. In fact, I'm perfectly happy with the way the movie ends. And how the characters end up. I just wish that the way they got there made more sense.
This movie has too much. I think that is the biggest problem with this movie. It has too much. It is trying to do too much, whether it thinks it has to. It's trying to appeal to too many people. I mean, to me, it looks like Disney didn't really have a full direction on this thing. They are letting each actor do their thing, which I think is fine when you're just doing standalone movies, but to do a trilogy without a full story arc in mind, I don't think it worked out for Disney this time.
So I know this has dragged on a little bit, and we're going to get past one more thing, maybe two, that I really want to talk about before letting everyone go here. If you've hung in with us this long, stick around. We're going to talk about the actual end of the movie. So at the end of the movie, you have Poe showing up with the ragtag resistance. Not very many of them. Lando and Chewie have gone off to the other planets, wherever they be, and said that, their whole goal is to amass a fleet. Any ship that wants to fight for freedom, basically, come here. This is a preeminent threat to the galaxy. Come here and join us. Plenty of movies have played that trope before, basically. I'm reminded mostly of Ready Player One is the most recent one that really, if you love this world, come fight for it, basically.
We can win this one. We actually have a plan. We can win this one if you join us.
They don't have a plan, by the way. Just to be clear, there's no actual plan. Just like Disney. And at the same time as the space battle's going on with all of these Star Destroyers with planet-killing guns on the bottom of them, just attached by carabiners as far as I can tell, Rey is on the Sith planet with Palpatine, and he says, if you strike me down with hatred, I can come into your body. I will be able to take over your body. So he wants to get rid of his frail, super injured self. And then be renewed, be youthful again. And kind of like in Return of the Jedi, like, he's trying to get Luke to strike him down. They don't really tell you in Return of the Jedi if that's what he's trying to do. It seems like a whole ceremony in this one. So what do you think of that? What do you think of the end?
I mean, yeah, like you said, they kind of allude to stuff like that. And granted, you wouldn't know this from movies, but in other, like, legends and stuff, too, there's always been kind of like Sith that can do that. And there, a lot of people like speculating. That's what they were thinking. How the Emperor was alive all this time is that his spirit, whatever, embodied someone else. That if you are someone that accepts the dark side, it allows a dark side spirit to like embody you, kind of thing on this. I'm kind of wondering too if Palpatine was, if it was planned all along to be, to embody Rey, or if he knew that Kylo Ren and Rey were going to go up against him and he was just luring them to make himself powerful again, or if that was kind of like, I'm just dealing with the situation kind of thing.
So, from my first viewing, only having watched the movie once, I got the feeling like he didn't know they were, what was it, Didacs in the Force, or
Yeah, they have some kind of connection. It's because
some super special
which
Force
that's
connection.
kind of weird too. The reason they have it is because she's a Palpatine and he's a Skywalker.
No. There's no actual reason they have
it.
It's convenient to the story.
It's convenient to the story.
But I can get behind the fact that it's a thing that the Force can do, seen as it binds the universe together, as Yoda says. Like, I can get behind that. But there's nothing in the story, the first viewing I watched it, that says that Palpatine had any idea. And Kylo says similar thing, like, what he doesn't know is this. Whether, Kylo has been wrong before, But I think the space battle is very lacking. I thought it wasn't that exciting. And even when the fleets of good ships show up, it didn't really get any more exciting. It was just something that was happening because you had to give something for Poe and Finn's characters to do. In Return of the Jedi, that last fleet battle means something. In this one, it really doesn't seem like it has the same stakes, even though it should. But what's happening on the planet, what's happening between Palpatine and Rey and Ben at this point, let's not even say Kylo, at this point he's more or less redeemed. He's been Solo again. I liked how most of that happened. I understand that it's kind of a silly willy Sith stew or something, strike me down and I will embody you, but I liked that ending more than I liked what was going on in the space battle. I just didn't care that much about the space battle.
Rey, when she was dying, she was just gonna die. But Ben Solo, when he died, he got the whole, Luke, Leia, Obi-Wan thing. He disappeared. What do you think about that?
You see, on page 735 of Revision 4, Matt, it says, go see page 520. Script said it had to happen. So I chalk that up to, this is a phenomenon in Star Trek. The doors in Star Trek are the smartest doors. They're the best doors. They're the greatest doors. You'll see a character walk towards a door, and it won't open. And it won't open because there's more dialogue to be said. At any normal point in Star Trek, that door should have opened. Being like, oh yeah, they're going to walk out. I need to open up. Let them through. And it's the same here. Rey doesn't dissolve into the Force. She just, dead body. Because if she did, what could Ben bring back?
I guess it's
because
the Force.
Because it had to.
She was meant to continue on, and Ben was meant to sacrifice himself. So by fulfilling that role in the Force, that's why Rey would have just died if Ben hadn't fulfilled his destiny. That's what he knew what he had to do all along, but was afraid to do it. He didn't know if he could sacrifice himself for Rey.
So I'm aware that especially if you're an apologist to some of these things, there's an out. There's always an out
There is
because
always an out.
we're talking about space wizards,
Yeah. Dark space wizards and good space wizards.
Yes, good
that
space
are
wizards and dark
sometimes bad.
space wizards. Yep. Like there's always an out. Like the Force has a way. It knows what's gonna happen. Basically, it's the preordainedness of the galaxy, which kind of takes things. It's that old fate versus not fate argument from Terminator 2.
Which that's a big part of this movie too, especially that's the whole thing about Rey's parentage not matter in this movie is like, well, she is from prominent parents, but it doesn't, it's your choices that do matter in the end. Just because she's a Palpatine doesn't mean she has to go to the dark side.
Yeah. So what I think is interesting, in 8 you see the Force do some things that you never see before, and in this one you see the Force do some really stupid things. Where in 8 I'm like, okay, I can get behind the Force kind of weird Force projection thing and what they got going on.
Leia Poppins.
Leia Poppins. I'm like, okay,
Flying
you're
through
seeing the Force do some things that are arguably within the bounds of what it can establishably have done before. But in this one, you're just seeing things where like, gee, if they could heal wounds, that would have been super awesome in basically all of the movies.
Well, they do tie it in a little bit to the Mandalorian, not to get into Mandalorian spoilers yet, but...
Yes. You see it. In fact, I think it is no coincidence, zero coincidence, that The Mandalorian, this week's episode, did not launch on Friday.
Oh, no, that is why. They did not want it to coincide with the release of the Star Wars film. They wanted it, they wanted Rise of Skywalker and Mandalorian to not compete with each other on the same day.
Okay, not that there are any competition because they're on completely different platforms. But I don't think it's any mistake that episode of The Mandalorian launched and Baby Yoda does the healing thing. Again, not trying to do Mandalorian spoilers, but we're doing episode 7 spoilers. The Force can heal things, and not just heal things. It can heal, like, deadly wounds. And I saw the scene where Rey stabs Kylo, He's on his deathbed. He's about done, And I thought to myself, if she heals him, this invalidates Qui-Gon Jinn's death. And sure enough, she heals him. She just Force heals him.
Because she had to. It's what's in the script.
What page?
Qui-Gon had to die because it's what was in the script. Obi-Wan didn't know how to Force heal. He was just a Padawan who shortly after then became a Jedi Knight. But he was just a Padawan. He didn't know how to Force heal.
Okay, fine. Let's go there. Let's go down this track. Episode 2. Much, much better Obi-Wan. We have Obi-Wan Master. He gets a lightsaber cut or wound on his leg from Count Dooku. Gee, sure would be great if there was some easy way to heal that.
Well, that's the thing, too. I haven't seen the Mandalorian episode yet, but I don't know. Like I said, this is all apologetic thing. Like I said, anything in this you can explain away. The only thing I can guess is she's able to heal because she's transferring her life force. If you're wounded, you can't heal yourself because you're not transferring your life force. If that makes any sense. Like it takes a little bit from you is what it seems to heal someone. Like you notice like Rey's hand was kind of, which we've seen this not in Star Wars, but in other stuff too. With people who have healing powers or whatever, it normally it doesn't just heal out of nowhere, it takes something from them. So this is definitely not their original idea. This is definitely something that, they're taking from other things. But yes, I totally agree. It's not in the script, Randall. It doesn't, it makes sense for this movie, so we're going to put it in this movie.
It only bothers me because, oh my god, it would have come in so handy in so many previous situations with Jedi. And I know that an apologist was going to say, well, listen, there's this line from Mace Windu where they say we should tell them that our ability to use the Force is diminished. I know that that's the defense go-to line for this. And I'm like, listen, even Yoda couldn't do it. Don't give me our Force ability. Yeah.
Maybe we go into the Jedi are really the bad guys, because they could have done this all along, and they just chose not to.
And they just chose not to. Okay, Dr. Manhattan. You could have turned that gun into flowers, and you chose not to.
Hey, I was still waiting for Jar Jar Binks to show up at the end as the Emperor in actuality. The Sith Lord, the darkest person in all. I don't know if you guys have seen that fan theory. That's pretty good. Jar Jar is really the one behind it all. I was waiting to see Jar Jar at the end of this movie.
Jar Jar's really behind it all. Okay, and then the last thing I want to talk about, past this weird Force healing battle, Rey has successfully killed the Emperor, we think. And the galaxy celebrates, and there's massive victories against First Order everywhere. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute. We already had this movie. The Civil War ended 30 years ago. Why didn't they just say the Civil War's still happening? Episode 7, Force Awakens. Opening scroll. The Galactic Civil War crawls on or drags on. It has been 30 years since blah. Set the stage that this is still a struggle between the New Republic and the remnants of the Galactic Empire. Just set that as your precedence, and Episode 7 makes more sense. The ending makes more sense.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that.
And if I'm getting into the very, very end, I enjoyed that Rey took Leia and Luke's lightsabers. I mean, she took them to Tatooine, to the only place where the Skywalker, like the only known Skywalker home is, I guess, other than Naboo.
Alderaan, which got destroyed, so it's not like Leia still has hers. So yes, I mean, it's where Anakin grew up, it's where Luke grew up, so that's basically the Skywalker homeworld.
And then you have the double sunset ending with Rey.
Yep.
And I liked how that was done. But there's gonna be more movies with Rey. There's gonna be something with Rey. They didn't show her having her own lightsaber with a cool new yellowish orange color.
Which I'm glad that's Rey's lightsaber and not when Disney decided to rename Anakin's lightsaber Rey's lightsaber for a time. I'm glad that Rey actually has her own lightsaber now.
Yep. She has her own lightsaber. She's, I guess, completed her training as it were. And we're gonna move on. I just wish they wouldn't. I liked the ending for the most part. It's the strongest part of the movie for me, personally. It finishes off character arcs. I just know that it's Disney and the machine has to keep on moving. It's the same with Marvel. Oh, you had Endgame, but the machine has to keep on moving. I'm like, oh, could you please... Like, I'm okay with you kind of going back in and doing things like The Mandalorian. I just... let the galaxy at this point rest in peace for some time. Give it time. Plan it.
I think Disney is doing some adjustings or whatever, doing not course corrections or whatever, but a lot of things that they announced content that they were gonna do, they're no longer doing. Like I don't know if Ryan Johnson is doing his trilogy anymore. We'll see. Right now, that's kind of on hiatus. The makers of the Game of Thrones series they're not doing their Star Wars project anymore. So it'll be interesting to see where Disney goes forward with Star Wars. I mean, and granted, they will release movies again at some point. We'll see how long that is. And with The Mandalorian doing well, and this movie, we'll see how well this movie does or doesn't do. We'll see where Disney goes on from here.
Yeah, we definitely will. So definitely thank you if you've stuck with us through most of the spoiler-filled review. We know we went all over the place, but that tends to be how we talk in real life when Matt and I have these kind of conversations. We jump all over. If you like this video, make sure to give us a like. If you like this kind of content, make sure that you subscribe. If you haven't already watched it, we do have our recommendations for the movie in our spoiler-free review. I'll put that up in a link. Definitely check it out. Right now, I'm Randall in Texas. Goodbye, everyone.
I'm Matt in Michigan. See you guys.